Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. King Charles receives briefing on concerns about Prince Andrew's condition. Buckingham Palace has started warning that Prince Andrew is unstable. This is not a sympathetic plea for assistance. Rather, it is a planned declaration of psychological warfare against a man who has become the biggest existential danger to the contemporary monarchy. This is a royal tactic that has never been considered before. Over the course of many years, the organization made sure that he was safe. But now that its very existence is in jeopardy, it has used its most hidden weapon. We uncover the endgame, which is a desperate and high-stakes effort to permanently neutralize the Duke of York, as well as the terrible family division that it has unleashed. Inside the plot to declare Prince Andrew mentally unfit, the Crown's final solution to the problem. The first shot was fired not with a cannon, but with a whisper, a precisely timed leak that was delivered to the most distinguished of megaphones, which was the Sunday Times. There was a message that was both scary and purposeful, and Roya Nikah, a royal journalist who is renowned for her flawless palace ties, became the designated conduit for it. According to reports, Prince Andrew was the late Queen's favorite son. The briefing was harsh, and it described him with a single deadly word: unstable. In the hidden language of royal communications, this was the equivalent of a strategic nuclear strike. It was not the clinical correctness of the term that motivated its selection. Rather, it was the historical resonance and strategic force of the word. It was a word that had not been weaponized with such public power since the worst days of the battle over Princess Diana, as experienced royal observers instantly remarked. This was the period of time when the term had not been used. It was a tactic that was used back then, just as it is now, to denigrate, isolate, and pathologize a person who was seen to be a danger to the order of the institution. In no way was this an isolated occurrence. Reports from inside the organization corroborate that this is the climax of a campaign of targeted leaks that lasted for 6 weeks. This effort was a softening-up exercise that was aimed at methodically developing a public narrative of a man crumbling. The tales started to dribble out, and each one added another layer to the picture of a prince who was on the verge of committing suicide. There was a stealthy removal of his weaponry, which had been a luxury in his previous life. There were rumors that started to emerge about a duty of care and worries for his mental health, which painted an image of a loving family struggling to deal with a devastating issue. Although this sudden outpouring of concern from the exact institution that sheltered him from charges of participation in a sex trafficking ring for decades sounds hollow to seasoned observers, it is clear that the institution is concerned about the situation. This situation is a case of grasping at straws, as one person close to the issue characterized it. The technique seems to be straightforward. If you are unable to remove the problem and you are afraid to subject it to judicial scrutiny, then you must redefine it. The Duke of York is no longer to be considered a possible criminal defendant. Rather, he is to be regarded as a patient in a mental health facility. The conclusion, according to the speculations of experts, may be as extreme as an involuntary stay in a mental hospital. This would be a solution that would address an immense number of difficulties for a monarchy that is essentially cornered. In the present, the ghost of asylums. The uncomfortable, the different, and the humiliating have often been discreetly and permanently removed from public view over the course of royal history. In order to comprehend the significance of this tactic, one must delve back into the shadowy corridors of the royal past. The British monarchy has a long and chilling precedent for dealing with family members who do not conform to its rigid norms. This history makes the current whispers about Prince Andrew's stability feel less like a modern mental health concern and more like the revival of a dark, ancestral tradition. The precedent has been in place for a long time. The most notorious instance, which was brought to the attention of the general public by the television series The Crown, is the one involving the nieces of the Queen Mother, Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon. At the Royal Earlswood Asylum for Mental Defectives, the two sisters were covertly institutionalized in 1941. They were born with significant developmental problems, and they were both committed there. Over the course of many decades, Burke's peerage, the most definitive reference to the aristocracy, included them on its list of dead individuals. Their very presence was seen to be an annoyance to the meticulously crafted image of a faultless royal dynasty. Therefore, they were removed from existence. The fact that their royal link was only discovered by coincidence in the 1980s is a disturbing monument to the firm's penchant for merciless self-preservation. They lived and died in obscurity. Tragically, this was not a unique incident. Epilepsy and learning problems were two conditions that Prince John, the youngest son of King George V and Queen Mary, struggled with his whole life. In order to protect him from his siblings and the scrutiny of the public, he was isolated in Wood Farm, which is located on the Sandringham estate. This is the exact same facility that is now being used in the uproar surrounding Prince Andrew. With the exception of a governess who took care of him, Prince John had a solitary life until the time of his death in 1919, when he was 13 years old and suffered a violent seizure. Due to the fact that his condition was regarded as incompatible with the requirements of monarchy, he was referred to as the Lost Prince, and was a footnote in the great royal tale. When confronted with a departure from the ideal, the monarchy's initial inclination has often been to hide, to isolate, and to eradicate the divergence. These historical events provide light on an institutional response. To properly understand the present campaign against Prince Andrew, it is necessary to consider it against this very uncomfortable backdrop. By portraying him as unstable, the palace is using a potent and historically successful playbook in order to achieve its goals. This causes the narrative to change from one of responsibility and justice to one of pathology and sympathy towards the individual. In doing so, it changes a legal and moral dilemma into a medical one, so removing it from the jurisdiction of the courts and the police and putting it behind the closed doors of private treatment. If this method were to be effective, it would not only be able to quiet Andrew, but it would also offer King Charles a supposedly humanitarian rationale for avoiding the one thing that he fears the most, which is his brother speaking under oath. The king is clearly hesitant to face the danger of such evidence bringing the monarchy to its knees, since it has the ability to bring about the collapse of the monarchy. According to the historical similarities, the mental and physical incarceration of a troubled royal is not an unfathomable nightmare for the crown. Rather, it is a tried and true remedy that has the potential to be the last answer. The attachment of 3 family homes. In addition to the psychological conflict that is being conducted against Prince Andrew, there is also a peculiar and highly publicized physical conflict that is taking place. A battle royale that is being fought over a triangle of royal lands. The battle, which has become a public spectacle, has been concentrated on Royal Lodge, Wood Farm, and Marsh Farm, which is much less well known. Royal historians believe this public spectacle to be both perplexing and very detrimental. The decision that King Charles has made to fight his brother's living arrangements via the media is a move that goes against all common thinking about crisis management. This decision has turned a private family problem into a running soap opera that involves moving trucks and obstinate final stands. Andrew's residence for the last 20 years has been Royal Lodge, a large estate in Windsor Great Park that has 30 rooms. This mansion has been at the center of the issue all along. The removal of King Charles's brother from this magnificent palace is a non-negotiable requirement for the monarch. For a considerable amount of time, several sources have claimed that the king wants Royal Lodge to be converted into a dower mansion for Queen Camilla, ensuring her prestige and comfort after his passing. As a result, Andrew's reluctance to quit has turned into an act of outright disobedience against the authority of the sovereign, which has resulted in a prolonged standoff that has been given the name Siege of Royal Lodge. The manner in which the king has handled this siege has been a textbook example of incompetence. It was not the litany of charges relating to Jeffrey Epstein that was the last straw, according to reports from the palace. Rather, it was the almost hysterically ludicrous sight of Andrew waving joyfully to tourists from his horse. Reportedly, this little act of public exposure caused the king to get enraged, which resulted in an abrupt and almost frenzied escalation of the situation. According to the allegations, Andrew was taken away to Wood Farm, which is located on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, while it was still nighttime. There was a great deal of meaning that was embedded behind this gesture. Wood Farm was a beloved and very humble refuge where Prince Philip spent his last years of retirement. It was a haven of shelter and calm for him. Not only that, but it was also the place where the reclusive Prince John spent his boyhood months. By relocating Andrew to that place, Charles was putting him in a setting that was rich with implications of both respectable retirement and concealed shame. However, the siege did not cease at that point. There was an instant opening of a new front. The eventual idea was to relocate Andrew to Marsh Farm, which was located on the estate and was in a far worse state of disrepair. On the other hand, information from both sides started to surface, which suggested that Andrew was digging in his heels once again, this time at Wood Farm. There were reports that the remodeling work at Marsh Farm had suddenly come to a standstill for unknown reasons. The whole situation has left both the general public and those who specialize in royal affairs perplexed. What is the reason why the king is allowing this royal musical chairs game to take place on the pages of the tabloids? There is no need to generate further headlines, other images of moving vehicles, or additional articles that preserve the controversy. The solution could be found in the more comprehensive tactic of applying psychological pressure. As a means of slowly deconstructing the last remnants of Andrew's identity and standing, Charles is publicly humiliating his brother, removing him from his stately house and placing him into a succession of lodgings that are progressively less prominent. It is a battle of attrition, and its purpose is to shatter his spirit. Nevertheless, it is a policy that is laden with danger, since it gives the impression that the monarchy is both condescending and preoccupied with property at a time when its moral authority is already in shambles. The grotesque sight of battling over numerous luxury properties at a time when the country is facing a crisis in terms of the expense of living only serves to underline the vast chasm that exists between the royal family and the people they are supposed to serve. The guardianship of a father, the strength of a son. Underneath the surface of these public maneuvers is a serious and perhaps catastrophic rift between the king and Prince William, who is the one who will succeed him as king. Concerning the very essence of monarchical existence in the 21st century, the Andrew problem has brought to light a fundamental conflict that spans several generations. Even if it means sacrificing openness, he is making an effort to handle the problem in the same manner that his mother may have done, discreetly, inside the organization, with the primary goal of safeguarding both the family and the institution. It is believed that his choice to continue supplying Andrew with a considerable private stipend, which is sufficient to fund a complete entourage of staff members including a gardener, maid, chef, and driver, as well as his unwavering reluctance to accept a police investigation, are both examples of this outmoded mentality. He is the king, and according to the explanation of one of the courtiers, The repercussions of Andrew testifying in court may be totally devastating for the royal family. Trying to ride out the storm and hand over a damaged but intact crown to his son, Charles is, as far as he sees it, playing the long game. William, on the other hand, does not consider this technique to be smart. Rather, he considers it to be cowardly and, ultimately, self-defeating. He is a representative of a generation that is aware of the fact that the legitimacy of the monarchy is now almost totally dependent on the moral authority and perceptions of the general population. One might say that he has a binary viewpoint, which means that you are either in or you are out. In this case, there is no compromise. Irrespective of how unpleasant the process may be, William must have Andrew surgically removed, since he is a poisonous asset. In the event that the Prince of Wales were to become king, his friends have made it clear that he would not obstruct a thorough investigation of his uncle by the police. This is an overtly disguised threat, as well as a straightforward criticism of the position that his father holds. It is the promise of a future monarch who will not put the feelings of his family ahead of the integrity of the institution. Beatrice and Eugenie, Andrew's children, are farther divided along ideological lines than their father. According to reports, William has a special mistrust for Eugenie because of her continued connection with Prince Harry. He considers her allegiance to be compromised as a result of this association. It is not a sign of sympathy that he perceives his father's involvement of the York princesses in family activities. Rather, he sees it as a dangerous blurring of divisions that weakens the distinct barrier that he feels must be created around the disgraced Duke. It is possible that William's skull is bursting, as one witness described it in a colorful way. A contemporary, grounded, and scandal-free picture of the future of the monarchy has been presented by him and his wife Catherine, who have worked relentlessly to convey this image. However, they have watched as it has been methodically eroded by the scandals of the past that have not been handled. His father's perceived weakness and his uncle's unforgivable transgressions have polluted the kingdom that he is about to inherit, which he must undoubtedly consider to be a steaming pile. He is on the point of inheriting this kingdom. The territory of the collateral. As a result of the Andrew incident, the impact is not confined to the Duke himself. Rather, it spreads outwards, causing severe collateral damage to those who are closest to him and generating new dangers to the stability of the crown that are unforeseeable. The actions of their father have permanently contaminated the lives of his daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, and they are unable to escape the difficult situation they find themselves in. An excellent illustration of this is the work that Princess Eugenie does for her charitable organization, the Anti-Slavery Collective. An irony that is both painful and deep is that a princess is devoting her life to the battle against contemporary slavery, while her own father is being suspected of connection with a known sex trafficking ring, which is a hideous kind of human servitude. On the subject of the connection between fake fashion and indentured labor, the charitable organization has just recently published a significant study that is the conclusion of 18 months of investigation. However, the group's royal creator was noticeably missing during this momentous occasion, which was crucial for the institution. During the launch, Eugenie was nowhere to be seen, and her name was only mentioned in passing in the promotional materials. This is a desperate plan to separate herself from her father in an effort to maintain her job and the credibility of her charity, according to sources who corroborate that this is a part of the strategy. But a lot of people think that it is a pointless gesture. How is it possible for a charitable organization that has the purpose of combating exploitation to keep a donor whose father has refused to answer questions about his ties with convicted sex traffickers? All things considered, the connection is just too poisonous, and the hypocrisy is too obvious. It is possible that the only realistic road ahead for the York sisters, in the eyes of the public, is to completely and publicly denounce their parents. This would be a decision that would be extremely agonizing and would break the royal family's rule of silence. The personal tragedy that befalls the princesses creates a terrible situation for the king in terms of strategy. Completely isolating Beatrice and Eugenie might perhaps provoke them, and even more dangerously, their mother, Sarah Ferguson, to engage in open rebellion. According to reports, the Duchess of York, who is known for being a wild card and unpredictable, has apparently engaged a ghostwriter in order to begin working on her memoirs. There is a possibility that both Fergie and Prince Andrew, who is feeling abandoned and betrayed, would decide to share their tales, which would be a disastrous situation for the palace. They are familiar with the locations of a great number of graves. A book that tells everything, or a series of bombshell interviews conducted from a safe haven in the Middle East, might bring to light facts that would make the interview that Oprah had with Harry and Meghan appear like a lovely tea party. This is the leverage that Andrew still has, the nuclear option that explains Charles's reluctant and half-measure attitude. Concerned about what Andrew could do if he is pushed to his limits, he is afraid. It is now necessary for the king to do a delicate balancing act. He must punish Andrew in a manner that is sufficient to appease both the general people and his successor, but not to the extent that he causes mutually assured annihilation. Unspoken inheritance of the person. The technique that King Charles is now using is not a solution to the Andrew issue. Rather, it is essentially cryogenically freezing it, which will result in a crisis that is far more severe and complicated for the following reign. He is, in fact, passing on this poisonous legacy to his son, Prince William, who is the recipient of this inheritance. All of the choices that are being taken right now, from the public disputes that are taking place over property to the unwillingness to cooperate with police enforcement, are storing up problems for tomorrow. The public briefings that William's team has been giving, which indicate that he intends to adopt a much harder approach, are more than simply statements of present displeasure. They are a public pledge, a marker that his future rule will be based on. If the Andrew controversy is still unfolding at the time that William ascends to the throne, then he will be legally and ethically obligated to take action in accordance with his earlier statements. An act that would precipitate the precise constitutional crisis that his father has tried so frantically to avoid, he would have no choice but to approve the police investigation that he has publicly backed. He will have no other option. However, it is possible that the ultimate authority does not rest in policy, but rather in property. The Sandringham estate, which includes both Wood Farm and Marsh Farm, is not one that belongs to the crown. It belongs to the king, and is considered to be his private property. In the event that King Charles passes away, it will be in the possession of King William. When that day comes, Prince Andrew will no longer be a tenant of his brother, who is able to forgive, but rather of his nephew, who is unable to forgive. It seems absolutely unimaginable that King William would let his disgraced uncle continue living on his own family estate, which serves as a continual and tangible reminder of the worst dishonor that the monarchy has ever experienced. When it finally arrives, the last eviction will be permanent and irrevocable. Throughout the entirety of this saga, the monarchy's most profound vulnerabilities have been exposed. These vulnerabilities include the monarchy's reliance on an antiquated code of silence, its struggle to reconcile familial loyalty with public duty, and the widening gap between an older generation that is steeped in tradition and a newer generation that is comprehending the harsh realities of contemporary public opinion. Despite the fact that King Charles is trying to oversee his brother's collapse using the covert, behind-the-scenes tactics of the 20th century, the crisis is unfolding on the worldwide harsh stage of the 21st century. When he decides to take the dark and unclear road of labeling his brother as unstable, he may have the mistaken belief that he is protecting the crown from the obvious and immediate threat that presents itself in a courtroom. However, by doing so, he is leaving behind a legacy of moral ambiguity and postponed justice, which will ensure that the ghost of Prince Andrew will continue to haunt the House of Windsor and the reign of his son for many years to come. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.